The first time I picked up a pulse rifle, 3 cadets laughed out loud. I didn't blame them. My stance was wrong. My elbows were too tight. Every manual on cryo station said the grip should be loose, fingers relaxed, wrist angled outward for recoil absorption. Mine wasn't like that. Mine never was. I gripped the weapon like it was trying to run away from me. "Look at her hands," someone whispered behind me. "She's choking that thing like it owes her money." I kept my eyes on the target 60 meters downrange. Nobody at the academy knew where I actually learned to shoot, and I intended to keep it that way. Because if they knew, they wouldn't laugh. They'd be afraid. My name is Ren Calloway, and I was 17 years old when I lied about my birth registry to get into Cryo's Combat Academy. The lie was small. 1 digit changed on a colony code. Nobody checks those things anymore, not since the collapse, not since half the registries burned along with the old Earth databanks. But somebody was about to check mine. I just didn't know it yet. The academy trained cadets from 6 border colonies, all of them born and raised on stations orbiting worlds most of us had never set foot on. We were the 2nd generation, maybe the 3rd. Nobody really counted anymore, except me. I was the only one in that room who remembered dirt under my fingernails. Real dirt. Real gravity pulling down instead of a station's spun centrifugal force faking it. That memory was supposed to be impossible for someone my age. Cadet Calloway. Instructor Reyes's voice cut through the range like a blade. "Your form is unconventional." Unconventional. That was the polite word for it. I lowered the rifle and turned to face him, expecting the same correction he gave everyone else. Loosen the grip. Trust the recoil dampener. Let the weapon breathe in your hands instead of strangling it. He didn't say any of that. The cluster held. Nobody's cluster ever held like that. Not even the instructors, not even the ones who'd been shooting for 20 years in real combat zones. That was when the whispering stopped being about my grip. It became about me. After the drill, Reyes pulled me aside into the equipment bay, away from the other cadets. His face had lost its usual flatness. There was something else there now. Something careful. "Where did you learn to hold a weapon like that?" he asked. I told him the story I always told. Self-taught, salvage range on the outer ring, no formal instructor. It was mostly true. It just left out the part that mattered. He didn't believe a word of it. "That grip," he said slowly, "isn't self-taught. Nobody teaches themselves to compensate for a gravity well that doesn't exist up here." My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I hadn't realized what I was doing until he said it out loud. On Cryo Station, in its false spin gravity, a rifle doesn't drop. It doesn't pull. There's no reason to brace your wrist the way you would if a real planet were tugging your bullets arc downward. I'd been shooting like I was still standing on solid ground. Ground that shouldn't have existed in my memory at all. "You're not from a station," Reyes said. It wasn't a question anymore. "You're Earthborn." I laughed. I actually laughed because the word sounded like something out of an old myth cadets whispered in the barracks after lights out. Earthborn. The last generation actually raised under real sky, real weather, real weight. Officially, there were none left. Officially, the last Earthborn had died out 2 decades ago when the final evacuation ships burned their fuel reserves, getting everyone off a dying planet. Officially, I didn't exist. "That's not funny," I said, though my voice came out thinner than I meant it to. Reyes didn't laugh either. "Only Earthborn can shoot like that," he said quietly. "The muscle memory doesn't transfer. Not genetically. Not through training. It has to be lived." I felt the floor of the equipment bay tilt under me, even though the station's gravity hadn't changed at all. He knew. Somehow, this man I'd known for 4 months, who'd never once looked at me twice, had just seen straight through 11 years of careful hiding. And the worst part was, I still didn't know how much he actually knew. "I need you to understand something," Reyes said, stepping closer, lowering his voice further, like the walls themselves might be listening. "If Command finds out what you are before I decide what to do about it, you will not graduate this academy. I'll be arrested. You'll be requisitioned." That word landed heavier than arrest ever could. Requisitioned meant property. I'd heard rumors about Earthborn in fleet custody. Nobody who went in ever came back out to tell their own story. Only fragments survived, second-hand, half-believed. Test subjects, some said. Others said something worse. Reyes watched my face carefully as all of this settled over me, and something in his expression shifted from suspicion into something closer to concern. "I'm not going to report you," he said finally. "Not yet." "Why not?" He didn't answer right away. Instead he walked to the equipment locker, pulled out a second rifle, and set it on the bench between us like an offering. "Because I need to know exactly what you can do," he said, "before someone else finds out first." That night I didn't sleep. I lay in my bunk running through everything I could remember from before the evacuation, which wasn't much, because I'd been 6 years old when the last transport lifted off. 6 years old, strapped into a jump seat, watching through a scratched viewport as the only home humanity had ever known shrank into a blue-green marble and then into nothing at all. My mother told me once, before she died on the transit ship, that Earthborn children carried something the stations could never replicate. She called it grounds. Every single one adjusted late, overcorrected, missed their shots by centimeters that would have gotten them killed in a real firefight. I didn't stumble at all. My body simply knew. Word started to spread anyway, the way it always does in a place with 300 bored cadets and nothing to do but gossip between drills. Nobody used the word Earthborn out loud. But they noticed. They noticed how my scores climbed past everyone else's on the range, how I moved through obstacle courses like the ground itself was cooperating with me and against them. A cadet named Priya cornered me in the mess hall a week later. "You're cheating somehow," she said. "Nobody's that good without an edge. Maybe I just practice more than you." "Nobody practices their way into ground sense," she snapped, and my blood went cold. Because that word wasn't supposed to exist outside the old stories. She'd heard it somewhere too, which meant someone besides Reyes already suspected. I confronted him about it that evening, cornering him in the same equipment bay where this had all started. "Who else knows?" I demanded. Reyes's jaw tightened. "Command flagged your registry 3 days ago. A discrepancy in your colony code. The same digit I changed. The lie that was supposed to be too small for anyone to notice. They're sending an auditor," he continued. "Someone from Fleet Intelligence. She arrives in 6 days. 6 days to disappear, or 6 days to be discovered." There was no third option that I could see. "Why are you telling me this instead of just turning me in?" I asked, and for the first time since I'd met him, Reyes looked like a man carrying something heavier than his rank required. "Because 22 years ago," he said, "I was the auditor who found the last Earthborn cadet at this academy." My breath caught somewhere in my chest and refused to move. "What happened to her?" "She's why I became an instructor instead of staying in intelligence," he said, and offered nothing more, no matter how many times I asked. Some silences tell you everything anyway. The next 6 days blurred together in a haze of double drills and stolen hours where Reyes tried to teach me how to hide what my body did instinctively. How to overcorrect on purpose, throw a shot slightly off-center, fake the hesitation that station-born cadets couldn't help but show. It felt like learning to limp when I'd spent my whole life running. "You have to be worse than you are," Reyes told me, again and again, "or you'll never be allowed to just be good." I hated every second of it, and I understood every reason why it mattered. The auditor arrived on the 7th day instead of the 6th, a full 24 hours early, which meant nobody had time to prepare for her at all. Her name was Director Voss, and she walked through the academy's front gate like she already owned every soul inside it. She requested combat footage from the last month. All of it unedited, time-stamped, cross-referenced against cadet registries. Reyes found me before she did, pulling me into a maintenance corridor with a look on his face I hadn't seen from him before. Fear plain and unhidden. "She's pulling your range footage from before I started coaching you," he said. "The early sessions. Before you knew to hold back. The sessions where I'd shot 6 for 6 with a cluster no station-born cadet could match. There was no faking my way out of footage that already existed." "What do I do?" I asked, and my voice cracked on the last word. 17 years old and suddenly feeling every bit of it. Reyes didn't answer with words. He handed me a data chip instead, small enough to hide inside my palm. There's a transport leaving the maintenance dock in 40 minutes, he said. Unregistered. It won't ask questions. You want me to run. I want you to live, he said. There's a difference, and command has never once cared about the second one. I stood there in that corridor with the chip burning against my skin, and I thought about my mother, and the blue-green marble shrinking in a viewport, and 11 years of hiding what I was inside gravity that never once felt like home. Director Voss's footsteps echoed somewhere down the hall behind us, growing closer with every second I hesitated. I made my choice before I even finished thinking it through. I ran. Not toward the maintenance dock Reyes had pointed me to, but toward the range instead, the one place in this entire station where I'd never once had to pretend. Voss found me there 4 minutes later, standing at the 60-meter line with a rifle in my hands and no intention left of hiding anything at all. "Cadet Calloway," she said, and her voice carried none of the surprise I expected. "I've been looking for you for a very long time." "You already knew," I said, "before the audit, before the registry flag. I've been tracking colony code discrepancies for 6 years," she said, stepping closer, her eyes never once leaving my hands on the rifle. "You're the 4th Earthborn I've found alive. The 4th. Not the first, not the last of a dying line, but the 4th of something command had convinced an entire generation no longer existed." "What happens to the other 3? I asked, and I already knew I might not like the answer. Voss's expression shifted into something I hadn't expected from a fleet intelligence officer. Something almost like relief. "They're safe," she said. "Somewhere command can't reach them. Somewhere your instructor should have told you about, if he trusted me even half as much as I once trusted him." Behind her, Reyes stepped into the range doorway, and the look that passed between the two of them told me everything the past 6 days of secrecy never had. They'd known each other before, long before, since the last Earthborn cadet Reyes had refused to let command take 22 years ago. "She's one of yours," Reyes said quietly. "She's one of ours," Voss corrected, and turned back to me with an offer instead of an arrest. "There's a place where Earthborn don't have to fake a limp to survive, Cadet Calloway. Where ground sense isn't a liability. It's the entire reason you're needed." I looked down at my hands, still wrapped tight around a rifle grip that 3 cadets had mocked on my very first day here, the grip that had never once belonged to a station, the grip built by real dirt and real weight and a childhood I barely remembered anymore. For the first time in 11 years, I didn't have to hide what those hands had learned. I lowered the rifle and I made my second choice of the day. This one I didn't run from at all.